Hey guys, it's once again time to talk about the DC reboot. Yippee! Now, to be fair, before the DC reboot, I was only a very casual comic book reader, and most of my meager collection at the time was made up of whatever I randomly stumbled upon while very rarely attending comic conventions. When news started going around that DC Comics was going to restart all of its continuity, it did for me what it was trying to do with every other potential new reader out there. It got me interested enough to seek out local comic shops in my area and start buying more regularly. And this would be all the easier to do since we wouldn't be put off by all the decades of confusing backstory and continuity that we know nothing about, right? Yeah, that was a lot of crap. The only comic that was actually rebooted was Action Comics. Every other comic book that they had? Let's just toss a number 1 on the cover and call it a day. Most of my patronage of the reboot comics stopped after issue 1, but such was not the case with Detective Comics. Why? Well, mostly because of this image. Oh my frickin' god. The Joker, the most iconic villain in the entire DC universe, is on the loose without his face. When I first saw this, you'd better believe that I was psyched to see what was going to happen after this. Ever since his conception, the Joker was all about being in the spotlight, making sure that every crime he committed was done so that you knew it was him who did it. Now he's ditched his instantly recognizable face, which will no doubt be replaced with something more inconspicuous? What horrible atrocities will he commit, and how long will he get away with it since no one knows who they should be looking for? And the disappointing answers to those questions will come a year later in The Death of the Family. By the way, I apologize in advance if this isn't as funny as some of my other reviews, but there are 23 issues in this story, so there's going to be a lot of skimming and summarizing. Anyway, the title is inspired by the storyline A Death in the Family, where Robin number 2, Jason Todd, was killed off by the Joker. You know, back in the 80s when characters died and actually stayed dead. So to name this story after another story that was such a huge piece of Batman's history, and to imply that this time he's going after Batman's entire family, you know that they aren't messing around with this one. But let's address the first problem with this story. The narrative itself looks more poorly planned out than a maze that was drawn while blindfolded. Let's take a look at this checklist that appeared all over DC Comics before its release. Now, stories that have larger consequences like this have been known to span several different titles, which certainly makes sense in this case, since we're dealing with the Joker killing off Batman's entire circle of allies. And to look at this list of comics that this story will be taking place in, you might think that this is also the order in which they should be collected and read. You'd be wrong. First of all, it lists Batgirl and Catwoman number 13 as preludes to the story, but they all happen after Batman number 13? Also, as preludes, you'd think that the information within those issues would be self-contained, or at least lead up to the events of the next issue on the list, which would be Batman number 14. Again, you'd be wrong. The events of Batgirl number 13, which, remember, are a prelude, happen sometime after an issue or two of Batman, while continuing through Batgirl number 14 through 16, and come to their conclusion in Batman number 17. All the while, each new issue of the story is continuing to come out before this prelude can even reach its conclusion, meaning that you can't even read these other comics if you want the end of Batgirl's story to be spoiler-free. Imagine watching Star Wars Episode 4, and then halfway through it just randomly cuts to the big reveal at the end of Episode 5.
A young Jedi named Darth Vader, who was a pupil of mine until he turned to evil, helped the Empire hunt down and destroy the Jedi Knights. He betrayed and murdered your father.
I am your father.
Catwoman's story is even more confusing and pointless. Like with Batgirl, we have no idea where this prelude fits in with the rest of the story, but unlike Batgirl, Catwoman's story is concluded within the confines of her own book. You want to know how it ends? After the Joker toys around with her in ways and locations completely confusing and nonsensical, we'll get to that in a minute, he lets her walk away! One of the Joker's mission statements is that he wants to drive the Batman into homicidal rage, which he does by either torturing or just flat out killing his allies. Here he has someone with whom he has a great amount of emotional investment, and he just lets her go. What?! He goes through all this trouble to capture one of the most elusive criminals in the DC universe, only so he can let her go?! In these 2 issues, he blows her up, tosses her into a sandstorm, shoots her with a water cannon, knocks her unconscious, gives her a new costume that could be laced with any number of deadly chemicals, paralyzes her, perches her precariously high above the city, shoots an arrow at her, runs her down with a truck, pushes her off a building, tries to feed her to piranhas, also he can just let her go? He has 11 chances to kill her, and he does nothing with them. He's been planning this thing for over a year now, and what does he accomplish out of Phase 1?
Nothing! Absolutely nothing!
Batgirl's story has a bit more relevance to the overall plot, but it's just as confusing as Catwoman's. Again, we see it happening sometime after the Joker gets his face back in Batman number 13, thus calling this a prelude completely meaningless. I stopped reading the Batgirl comics when the creators thought that retconning her dead mother was a better storyline than telling us how she got her freaking legs back, and Batgirl number 13 ends with her mother being abducted by some of the Joker's henchmen. And the visual irony of them dressing up like Hawaiian tourists, a la The Killing Joke, is completely lost on her, since she wasn't there to see it. Batgirl number 14 shows Batgirl tracking the Joker to a roller rink, where he has her mother rigged to explode if Batgirl tries to save her. Batgirl asks Joker what he wants from her, and it's here where we see the entire story fall apart. He asks for Batgirl's hand in marriage with her mother's severed ring finger. Now, I can actually appreciate the humor in the Joker proposing to any woman in this particular fashion. As horrific as this isn't what I'm objecting to. When you actually stop and think about it, him proposing to some woman with her mother's severed ring finger, as terrible as that is, that's kind of funny. But in spite of that, we now have to ask one very important question here. Why does the Joker want to marry Batgirl? This completely ruins the story because you realize that nothing the Joker does here makes any bit of sense. Why did the Joker capture Catwoman just so he could let her go? We don't know. Why did the Joker sever his face just so he could infiltrate Gotham PD and get it back? We don't know. Why did he just strap it over his head instead of trying to have it surgically replaced? We don't know. We've seen him wear different costumes to accommodate the caper, so why is he dressed like a mechanic when nothing about this plan is mechanic-related? We don't know. Why does he want to marry Batgirl instead of kill her? We don't know! We don't know why he does any of the things he does in this story. They want us to think that he's a wild card, that he's the embodiment of chaos and all that, but that doesn't mean he can just do things at random. That doesn't make any sense. What's the point of hyping up this story as the death of the family, when the first two sub-stories show him not even trying to kill the family? Marrying Batgirl isn't going to kill the family, it's only going to add to it. Speaking of things not making any sense, what's the point of turning the Joker into Leatherface? We have a character who for decades has done nothing but commit comical crimes, and try to show people what a terrible joke the world is. You put that character in the guise of a clown, that makes sense. Leatherface is a mentally regressed hillbilly with a taste for human flesh. What does that have to do with the Joker? I'm not against the idea of Batman facing a Leatherface-like villain, but if they really want to do that, why not just resurrect the character Cornelius Stirk? In the spirit of reboots, why not reboot this character into something that modern readers can be afraid of? Or, hell, if you really have to turn Joker into Leatherface, have him kill his victims, peel their faces off, paint them up to look like new clown faces, and then he can just strap those over his head. Boom! Same thing, and you also get a new twist on the whole killing your victims with a smile on their face thing. You gotta think here, people! Come on! But this is just stupid. There's no reason for the Joker to turn himself into a Leatherface knockoff, nor is there any reason to make him so stupid as to think that strapping a dead piece of flesh over bare muscle is a good idea. Yes, he's insane, but anyone who can constantly confound the Caped Crusader like he does should be smarter than this. And how can he even form words anyway?
It makes no sense. I should be like...
Ugh. Anyway, Batgirl fights the Joker with every intention of killing him, but then she's knocked out by her long-lost brother James, who has some criminal history that I don't know or care about. He threatens to kill her, and thus ruin Joker's plans, unless he frees their mother. Hey, Jimmy? She was just about to kill the Joker, and you're armed with knives and grenades and the skills necessary to take down one of Gotham City's most prolific crime fighters. If you really want to save your mother from the Joker, why don't you, I don't know, let Batgirl kill him, or why don't you just kill him yourself? But he ends up throwing a grenade at the Joker anyway, so what was even the point of knocking out Batgirl or trying to bargain with the Joker? And this is all completely pointless because Batgirl wakes up to find a completely unharmed Joker holding something bloody on a silver platter. And it points out that this will be concluded in Batman number 17. Yes. This prelude comic doesn't come to its conclusion until the very end of the story that it's precluding. I honestly can't tell what's worse. The fact that this comic doesn't make any kind of narrative sense, or the fact that it had 9 editors on it!